So for those who don't know, my guess is you guys probably know who I am, but for those who don't know, the Lego Bionicle comic was published by DC Comics, came out for several years before I was involved. This is the last issue of the first series, and it's kind of funny. Somebody gave me a copy of this, and I wasn't. This is written by Greg Farshdey and drawn by Randy Elliott. I wasn't aware of the very last page of this until just today, that announces the number 0 coming next month. It says followed by Bionicle number 1. So at this point, they hadn't worked out that the next series of Bionicle comics was going to be Bionicle Ignition, the one that I started working on. That's my 0 issue, and my face is aged, but you guys should remember me. If you had the 0 issue and opened it up on the inside, there I am looking young and spry, and my hair's combed down, not up, and I don't have glasses. But it's the same person. I actually got the job to draw the Lego Bionicle comic book as sort of my first major job in comics. I had broken into the comic book industry, self-publishing a comic book called Shiver in the Dark, and I was traveling the country promoting the series when I was at Philadelphia, the Wizard Philadelphia comic book convention, and I'm so embarrassed because I don't know who it was, but there was someone who was an art director at DC Comics that asked for copies of the Shiver in the Dark comic book just to take to the office. I wanted to sell them, but at the same time, you know, professional courtesy states that I should give them the copies, and I did, and boy, am I glad I did, because they circulated the office, and somebody thought that I would be a good match for the Bionicle series. I wasn't offered the job so much as I was offered the opportunity to try out for it. It was a big job for DC, and they had several other artists whom they invited to make samples. I know that there were a couple rounds of sort of taking, I don't know how many people applied for this job, but I know they started off with a pretty large number and whittled it down. I think it got down to, of all the submissions they got, they took their favorite 6 and presented those to different focus groups of children and asked them what they liked, what they didn't like. And long story short, I beat everybody out. I was the big winner. I remember Jay Gardner was the editor of this book, and I had some correspondence with him on the wired telephone. It was so long ago. And after about a month of back and forth of him saying, hey, we liked your sample, you've made it to the next round, I finally had this phone call that lasted about an hour, and I had a feeling that maybe I had won out. Maybe I was going to be offered the job, and that's what happened. They asked me a few questions just about my availability and how quickly I could work, so on and so forth. And I was delighted to get the job. It changed my life. It really did. And I remembered thinking that it was sort of like, this was the goal. You know, I had self-published some comics. It was me trying to break into the industry, get noticed, and everything worked out, came together. And I remember Jay, after he'd offered me the job, was kind of excited, and the professional part of the conversation had died down and it became a little bit more casual. And he said, I'm excited to work with you. I said, I haven't seen a whole lot of your work though. And I said, well, this is my first big job. Going to be my first job working for anybody other than something that was self-published. That's not true. I'd actually done some trading cards for DC Comics, but they were individual images. It wasn't, a 20-page comic like this. So he was a little bit terrified because, a new guy can screw up the deadline, and I promised him I wasn't going to. And he said, no, I know you won't. I said, no, you don't. You ought to be at least a little worried, but I promise you, it's my first job. I'll work really hard on it. And if you just bear with me, if I ask any dumb questions, give me some good answers. And he was very patient. He was a fantastic first editor. I couldn't have been happier, frankly. I remember he called me and told me that they offered me the job and they needed something right away because the first issue had to come out on time. And it ended up being this 0 issue that had the fold-out poster that a lot of people know. It's nice when I hold it upside down. But I remember I was at the New York Comic Con just after I'd gotten this job. I hadn't done anything for it, but I went into the DC offices to meet my editor. And I met Jay, we shook hands, and he said, hey, we've got the first issue coming up, deadline here really soon. Let's talk about what the poster will look like. And we went downstairs into sort of the don't know what I would call it, but the production room at DC Comics, got paper and pencil, and literally we were just working out sketches of what the poster would look like. And we got them mostly nailed down. I did the New York Comic Con, flew home, drew it in a hurry, and then it was ready to go to press, and they told me they wanted some photos of me and some quick interview questions, and almost immediately it seemed like this thing came out. Now, I don't know for sure, so I'm projecting here, but the first issue of BIONICLE, number 1, not number 0, but the first issue, number 1, was a double-sized issue. And I'd often thought that this may have been double-sized because Lego and DC probably had a contract for an entire year's worth of comics, and that dictated how many pages would be made and what the cost of the thing was going to be. Because the 0 issue was a lot smaller, and mostly it was just this poster, I figured the additional pages were made up in the issue number 1 to fulfill the contract. Makes sense to me. But I do remember him calling me up, and I was excited for this job. I felt very confident I could do it, but let's be honest, I said it was my first comic book for another publisher. It was a little daunting, and he said, hey, we've decided to make the first issue double-sized. And as I said, I think it was to make up for the pages from issue 0. Not a big deal, but when your first issue is already a little daunting and they say it's going to be twice as large, I remember hanging up the phone, and it's just like, no matter what happens, I have to make this job work. I mean, I have to. And I think it was only about 20 pages, which I can do 20 pages quite regularly now in a month. But at the time, that seemed like an awful lot. And, I'm not supposed to say this, but I'll be honest. There was a little bit of fear in me. Can I get it done? So I sat down and I just said, just get one page done and then get one more. And I remember I just kept my head down, and I got to where I had, I think, 3 pages left. And the funny thing is, when you make those 17 pages back to back to back to back, I was better, faster, more confident artist on the project 17 pages in than I was on the first page by far. Even though I had 3 pages left to go, I suddenly felt really confident. I said, sure, I can get this done. We got it done, no problem. And then one of the interesting things about working on the series is you turn the issue in, and then there's a little bit of a silence because the next issue doesn't come out for 2 months. Most comic books have an issue every month, but Lego was every other month. And that meant that when I turned in an issue, I usually had an odd period of about 2 weeks dead time, sometimes 10 days, where I didn't have a script for the next issue. I couldn't work ahead. It was just sort of works complete and you're on hold, which was kind of nice because I got to turn in an issue and then sort of celebrate and feel like, I could goof off for a little while. I mean, there literally wasn't any way for me to work ahead, but that meant that when I received the scripts a little later, it meant that they were more timely. It meant that if there were any toys that were coming out, they could include those toys to be a little bit more accurate for including those new sets. And if there were some sets they were still designing, they gave themselves a little bit more time to work with it, and which was very necessary because I've told the story several times how when Bison and Fenrek came out, they were in the script, but the toys didn't exist. I've told that story several times, and I think I told it on a live feed here before, so I won't tell it in such really long terms, but I ended up having to draw, I think, all of issue 5, which is where they first appear, with holes in the art, waiting for the toys to arrive. And they FedExed them to me. In fact, truth be told, truly, this is the Bison and Fenrek set that I drew, the very set I used to draw Lego BIONICLE 5, and this is the very first Bison and Fenrek set in existence in the world, and they told me that. I had to sign all kinds of forms saying that I was receiving them, and I wouldn't let anybody see them, I wouldn't photograph them, I wouldn't even talk about them or post their names. I had to fly to the airport and show ID and pick them up and race home, and I think I had to add them to several pages and get it out the door. Like, I don't think I had a whole 20 hours to get it done. It was incredible, but we made it. That's sometimes you work close to the deadline. And I will tell you, everybody from Toby Dekowitz, who was the art director for Lego, to the people in Europe, everybody, DC Comics, we were on pins and needles, and everything had to fall right in order for me to even get these things, get the pages done, get them get them to DC to approved, and then to Lego to approved, and then to the printer. It was so close, but got it done. I'm going to check my feed and see if I have any good comments here that I should read.
I can ask you some questions, honey. They can hear me in here.
Okay, great.
So, for one thing, somebody asked, if you could talk a little bit about what it was like to develop these characters in your style. How did you approach that? Since this is so different than what you've become known for since then.
I love that question. So that was the biggest challenge. When I was first offered an approach to do this job, I thought, okay, well, let me track down some of the comic books and see what you guys are already doing, and go to the toy aisle and grab some of these comics. And they said, you can go to the toy aisle, but they really specifically asked me not to look at the previous comics. I'm known for having a darker, more expressive style, as you guys know if you saw the comic book, or if you tuned in last year for World Bionicle Day. I drew this live on the feed. This is an image of Axon. If you missed last year, this is very comparable to what the pages from the Lego Bionicle actually look like that I drew. In fact, I drew this on some of the leftover DC Comics paper that I had from when I first did Bionicle, so I made it as accurately as possible. But I had to engage with what are these things going to look like, and my initial response is, well, when you're working on a product that already exists, you go to the store, you pick up what the company has already made, and you try to sort of fit that model. They kept telling me specifically they didn't want that. It's kind of hard to believe because it was a really successful line. But Lego was looking for a new look. They were looking to make the comic and the toy appeal to some older fans, which was kind of exciting to me. It gave me more freedom. I think, if I know correctly, I think DC Comics actually pitched to Lego the idea of going with a more dark, expressive, looser style as something that might appeal to older fans. And I think they kind of had to be talked into it. I think Lego was interested, but if there was something that seemed really smart, is that Lego is great at making toys, right? And they said, we want a good comic book, so let's bring in DC Comics. They know how to make comic books. DC brought me in because I knew how to draw. But I remember when I was turning in my sample pages to get this job, they kept telling me repeatedly, do your thing. We know what you draw like. Make it expressive. And I remember when I sat down to make the piece, I still was doubting a little bit whether or not they meant it. And I thought, well, maybe you show it up a little bit so you can show the details better. And then I thought to myself, you know what? They kept telling you to do your own thing. And I thought, they've got a million artists they can hire. What's the value of having me if I'm not going to be me? So I, at the last minute, just took this deep breath, looked at them, made a couple sketches, really trying to embrace what I found interesting about them, and then kind of like just go for it, so to speak. If I can make something that I think is interesting, I should do it. And the thing that dawned on me is if I make it that way, and I'm lucky enough to get the job, that means that I can probably repeat what I've done. If I did something that was too drastically different from how I'm used to working, and I'm given the job, that might be difficult for me to make the pages consistent. So I just put my head down and I made this piece, and it really was very comparable to this. And if you looked at a lot of conventional comic book art, a lot of comic book art has just hard black outlines on everything, not large areas of black, and not a lot of lighting that is rendered in or lighting effects that's rendered in the art. These days, a lot of lighting effects is rendered in the computer coloring. Well, that's not how I was used to working. Now, I did get to team up with Alex Blayard, who was the colorist on Lego Bionicle. I colored the cover to number 0, the cover to number 1, and the poster to number 0, but Alex did all the other coloring on everything else. And I think it was kind of perfect because I kept trying to push and make the thing a little bit grittier, a little bit darker, more expressive, and Lego liked it, but I could tell it was also very different from what they had. So they had Alex kind of take the really expressive line work I did, and then he was almost like the control man, because I would get kind of wound up and just say, you know what, this character is red. I'd be drawing somebody like Hakan, and I said, and there's only lightning around him, and otherwise it's really dark, and lightning is kind of a bright blue light. And in my head, I would just think, okay, he's going to be reflecting blue light, and that was maybe a little farther than they wanted. So I could have like some light reflecting off of Hakan, but he still essentially needed to be red. So what I got to do then is I got to really draw the piece to where I could really affect the form. I could dictate the pace of all the action. What things looked like in a black and white sense was all up to me. In fact, when I made the pieces, they were really grayscaled. They weren't black and white line art. They would be black and white line art that might have an ink wash or something like that. So I'm really determining how much light there is. Alex got to determine literally how much color there was in areas, and then in some instances he would add some highlights or little glints and things like that. Usually he could look at what I was doing and he got a sense of the mood and feel for the piece, and then he got to decide how much what had its specific focus for color or light. He could play up or play down what I'd done. One of the pieces I think of is there's an axon one. I'll take Ailey's question in just a second, but there's an axon panel where I rendered a whole bunch of lighting on this one. And if you can see, think of this as a black and white piece, you can see how I really dictated that the light source was going to be behind axon. I'm talking about this one right here. And Alex could see that in the art, and he played that up and had the colors fit exactly what I was going for.
So we've had a couple of questions about the 2009 larger serial. All Our Sins Remembered. Can you just talk about that project generally? How is it similar or different? What did you get to do throughout that?
So I wanted to talk about that because I actually have a page of art from that I was going to show you guys, because it's a different thing than what I normally did. In fact, I was brought back to that after the fact. Here, I'll show you this. This will be fun. This will answer the question. This is one of the pages, the original art pages from issue 6. This was the online only issue. I know that there was paper cuts reprinted this, but as I said, these are all rendered in kind of black and white line art with some grays to it. It's kind of interesting because you can see this character here is kind of red. It's a little bit hard to see, but some of that has to do with the pen I've used has faded just a little bit. And that is one of the risks you run when you mix your mediums together. But this is an 11 by 17 page. This was on the DC board. This is what I typically draw them on. But for the paper cuts, the 2009, the book had a different set of proportions to it. It was a digest size book that was smaller, whereas the regular Lego comic was the size. The 2009 book was only about that big. I hope you can see how big that is. It's about TV guide size. So I actually drew the art on a smaller board. And I remember I was approached by Paper Cuts to do this. Paper Cuts had gotten the rights to reprint all the Bionicles, and then they sold well enough, they said, let's make some more. As near as I know, the 2009 series may have come out just after the toy line production had ended. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember the sequence of events here. But nonetheless, because DC wasn't doing the comic book, and I think Lego was winding the toy down a little bit, it gave us the opportunity to really tie up some loose ends in the storyline. And this is the last page where everything has kind of gone wrong. The planet has exploded. Everybody's left. Everybody's sort of learned the lesson the hard way of all the fighting and the conflict they'd had. And what I tried to draw here, this wasn't in the script, but these are the two weapons that the main characters hold, and I had them stick them into the ground and walk off without them, as though the battle's over and there's nothing worth fighting for anymore. I remember when they offered me this job and they told me the format was going to be different. They needed it pretty quickly. I don't remember if I got a whole lot of toys for the models on this. I don't think I did. For most of the Lego Ignition series, I got all the toys, but the All Our Sins Remembered was a little bit faster. So I think I got a few toys from the company. One of them I think I had to go out and buy just to make it easier. It was this little small one here.
Yes, several folks have asked about what reference were you given for that All Our Sins?
Yeah, I bet they are, because you guys want to know about those elemental lords, I'm sure. So I made all of those up. They were in the script. I was told more or less what they had to do, and I was given free reign on them. And they are some crazy, wacky designs, but I had fun with it. And if you've seen me talk about Lego Bionicle before, one of the things I always said was that I tried to make the world that they were in be as natural as possible. I tried to make them look as natural as possible. I wanted them to be able to get rusty, get bent, get dirty. Their world should be alive, right? Which helps make them alive. So when I made the Elemental Lords, I said, well, they're not going to be mechanical. the fire lord is fire. He burns. The closest thing I can think of that really got away from that is the water lord had a globe for a head. And I know that somebody out there went and tried to make Lego figures of these, which I love. I saw the picture of them today on Instagram. They look great. Some of those things I had to make up, and there were some other Matoran and other characters that were in this that I just got to make up as well. And I got to tell you, one of the things I'm really flattered by are people who went through the book and made sets out of Lego pieces that they could find, trying to match my designs for the made-up Matoran. That was really cool. When I got this job, I knew that I was probably going to be contributing to the lore of this, and people are going to be asking me some questions. And if I draw something, it's kind of, it's going to become canon. That's what it is. That's what it looks like. It needs to work. It needs to fit what had come before. I try to take that responsibility on, but at the same time, you want to have a little bit of fun and freedom. And I think that kind of came out with my Elemental Lords, because I knew that they didn't have to fit Lego toy models. So it was my real chance to draw something that was more organic and not mechanical. Now, I will tell you the one thing I really, really wanted to do, and I'm looking over my wife because somebody's going to do this now that I've said this. If you look at the panel where the Elemental Lords are all sitting at the table, I wanted to put chairs on the back of each of them, which had logos for each elemental on their chair. Much like, Justice League, the Batman has to sit in a chair with the Bat logo, and Superman has to sit in a chair with the Superman logo. There's something that really is appealing to me about that kind of cartoonish formality. I don't think it really works that well in the real world, but if you watch enough show like Venture Brothers, bad guys always have to have their layered, and they have to have logos around so you know how bad they are. I mean, that's half the fun of making this stuff.
So they've specifically asked about the Batera in All Our Sins.
I have to remember who that is, so this is where I'm embarrassed. I promised everybody I would remember this as much as I could, and I don't remember who the Batera is. So I'll answer the question. I'm going to need some better guidance. I wish I had the book in front of me. I don't. So
in the meantime, then, I know you talked about working with the colorist a little bit already. I know you kept the same colorist through the whole run, didn't you? The first 2 years you worked on it?
Yeah, so let's see. Greg Farshey wrote the whole thing. By the way, this is the piece I drew for World Bionicle Day 2 years ago. I thought I would vamp a little bit. This is another Axon I did. Tonight, if we have time, I'm going to try to draw beads on in Fenrec. Greg Farshey wrote the whole thing throughout. I got to do the pencils and inks, and then the coloring was by Alex Blayard, and Alex did a really, really good job. In fact, when I first started this, I have to admit this, I say this all the time, I wasn't in love with Alex's coloring on it. I'm just being completely honest. I really wanted the thing to be a little bit darker and even more out there than it was. But Alex was perfect. He did a great job. He was very good at taking what I had done and anchoring it the way Lego wanted it done. And this is the thing I have to say. The older I got, the more I've drawn, the more digital coloring I did. Every time I go back and I look at Bionicle, I realize that Alex did a better job than I thought. Every couple of years I look at him, I honestly think it's better than I thought it was 2 years ago, and better than I thought it was 2 years before that. I learned a lot from him. I've written him and told him. I mean, he really made me look great.
I think you should tell the story about the water and the bubbles.
Oh yeah, this is pretty good. I'm so glad Ailey mentioned this. So this is a good example of it. This is the cover to number 11. So as you know, the second year of the Lego Bionicle comic book involves all the underwater characters, and showing motion underwater, you've got a couple things that really help you. You can have like smoke and soot come off the ocean floor, or you can have bubbles trail off their heads. If they're really punching or doing anything big, bubbles appear. Now, there are animals that thrash and fight underwater, and they don't create any bubbles because, shark, for example, is underwater all the time, and there's no way for them to produce bubbles. But it's a great technique as an artist, and so I would draw these. And Greg said, or not Greg, Alex Blayard, the color, said, you don't need to draw all those bubbles. And I said, they work so well, man. They add emotion or life. Really, we could use the bubbles as a storytelling tool. If a character was surprised and we want him to gasp, he can have, bubbles shoot out as though like like the way anyone else on Earth would respond. But he said, listen, I'm going to make a digital brush that's going to be the bubbles. And I hadn't done a lot with making digital brushes on Photoshop at the time, but since then I realized it was a great idea. They look wonderful. So most of the bubbles that are in here, he added in. You can see them, they go up through the G on the BIONICLE logo. He just said, I don't have to color those if you just don't include them. I will add all of them. And I'm kind of a control freak, so I hated to do that. But he talked me into it, and throughout the book, you can find great panels with the bubbles. They look wonderful. It's his doing for almost all of them. There are a few places where I have drawn some, where I just kind of felt like I wanted a specific effect. Or like in this case, here's a place where you have some soot and dirt making bubbles. That has to be part of the art. It's dictated, so I drew all of those. But very often, this panel here, you see at the top above the word balloons, he's sneaked in the bubbles there. That's all Gray, or that's all Alex. So thank you, Alex. It was a brilliant idea. It made them really uniformed. And I think what's also cool about him is because he used a Photoshop brush, making them that uniformed means that after you read a couple panels with them featuring these bubbles, you get used to what they are. You don't dwell on them anymore. It just sort of adds a sort of atmosphere that you're underwater, but it doesn't turn to an element that you focus on. Because let's face it, if you and I were underwater and we were snorkeling or whatever, we would get used to the bubbles all the time and we would look past them. But if they're not uniform, you probably don't do that.
So going back to the previous conversation about all our sins remembered.
Yeah.
The Vatera are the white and blue robo guys, also described as murder robots. Shape-shifting robots that hunted the Glatorian.
Okay, I think I remember these guys. This is like there's an army of these guys, and I got to make these guys up. They're what I think I am. See, somewhere way in the other room, I know I have a copy of this, and I should have gotten it back. So this is the thing. When you're working on this book, particularly when you have characters like this that are not doing as much of the talking, but are part of the action, the story is written to where they need to do a particular thing. They are the fighters, so I need to draw them look fighting and warlike, and they need to be sort of cool looking, but got very little guidance on what these things should look like at all. I mean, I literally took existing Bionicles like this, and I tried to think of like the staff that Vizon is holding here. This would be a great guidance for what their weapons should look like. You know, when I got the job, I remember being told that these characters, they don't really have weapons, they have tools. And that was something that was kind of driven home about me. But as the thing went on, you know, they had Zammerfier's shooters and things like that. And I kind of feeling like these are looking more and more like weapons all the time. Finally, in the last chapter, the All Our Sins Remembered, I mean, we really end up with like warring characters that are just there to war. And so I tried to draw them almost like a Roman army. You know, they don't have guns. They have knives and blades, and you know their combat is really hand to hand. But like I said, I was given very little guidance on that, and I remember turning in those pages, and I think I had maybe, I want to say no corrections. And I remember when I negotiated the contract on it, I remember because it had to be done quickly, and the art was smaller, there was some demands on it. I can't believe I'm telling you this, but I said I had like three things written into my contract. So one, because the pages were smaller, I said no more than 3 panels per page. It's just, you're not going to be able to see very much. It's going to be really hard for me to get in there and do very many painterly things with the background. So if you can have 1 panel, 2 panel, or 3 panels. And they said fine. And then I also said, I'm going to draw this correctly. I don't want any corrections unless, I've drawn the wrong character. There's something specifically I've drawn, wrong. Like I'm supposed to draw a bridge and instead I drew a submarine or something like that. And even with that being the case, I was aware that if something was wrong or they really need something changed, they could ask me and I would change it. But I was given no corrections on this, if I recall. There were, for the regular Lego Bionicle Ignition comic book, there were some issues that had some corrections. I remember one time they had me turn Axon's head. Sometimes there were very, minor ones. I remember one time I had him looking at his axis profile, and they wanted to see more of his face, so it became a 3/4 view. Typically, when I got corrections, they were kind of like that. Maybe they wanted to show the toy a little bit better. But I kind of understood that pretty quickly. You know, the obviously when I draw the thing, what I'm trying to do is tell the story as clearly as I can. But let's be honest, when a character shows up and it's new, or if it's a new set, Lego wanted the fans really to get a good look at that character. I remember for issue number 2, I got issue 2 here in front of me. I think it's issue 2 that it introduces Axon, by the way, my favorite Bionicle.
But is he your favorite to draw? That's the question.
He's both.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he shows up here. Very, very rarely did I change anything from what Greg had given me for the script. Greg is the Bionicle guru. Greg Farshey, I'm talking about, the writer. And you know he is the man on that stuff. But every once in a while, there were times where I kind of felt like I wanted to add or change something, either typically to add clarity to the story or to emphasize a moment. And so the one that I remember most of all is this picture here where Axon is grandstanding and he is sort of laid out the Piraka here and he's sort of announcing who he is. And I just felt that if he's sort of the real guardian of the Mask of Life, that, and he really performed as a hero in a way that the other characters hadn't done yet, I felt, let's have him sort of throw down and announce who he is. I'm the guy in charge, and that's why he has this panel. Let's see. I was placed on this island as the guardian of the Mask of Life, one of many. All of my power and all of my very life is dedicated to keeping it out of the hands of trash like you. And I thought, okay, so let's add an extra panel in, because I think initially all this text was going to be on this panel of him catching his axe, which is fine, but this looks more sort of like a Thor sort of, you know, calling down lightning from the mountain. You know, he's the boss of everything here. So I moved a few panels around, made that. I got distracted, but what was I supposed to be answering just then?
Honestly, you've wandered so far afield, I'm just going to move us on. For one thing, one of the folks who's watching on YouTube through the official Bionicle feed, says his name is Brandon, and he, I want to make sure I get the right one. He redrew your Vizon and Fenrak splash in middle school, and you got excited to see it and wanted to share it with others. He's still got it in a book, and he wants to catch you at a show soon.
I would love that.
A couple of people have asked about upcoming shows or events or things like that. Like, are you planning on C2E2 next year?
Should be at C2E2 next year. I'm going to probably have a very big VIP event at C2E2. You should come see me there. I'll be at the Baltimore Comic-Con coming up in a couple of weeks. I will be at the Cincinnati Comic-Con. I think I'm going to be at the New York Comic-Con. I've got my table. I need to work out a few things as far as my travel and lodging, and I have a potential deadline conflict, but so that's still a little bit up in the air, but I really want to be at New York. If you go to my website, stuartsayger.com, you can see all the comic book conventions I'm going to go to, and please bring your Bionicles. I'm happy to tell you all about them. As well, I'm going to remind everybody, Monday at 7:30 on my Facebook and Instagram show, I'm going to have a follow-up Bionicle show. I'm going to pull out some other art out of the archive so we can talk about that. I'm going to be selling signed copies of Bionicle. If you want some Bionicle art for yourself, it's a great place to be. We're going to give away a piece of original Bionicle art too. That'll be Monday at 7:30 Eastern Time. How about, go ahead.
Several people have asked more specifics about how you draw these things, what tools you use, how you lay them out. I thought that might be a useful segue.
We're going to segue. I'm going to go into drawing some stuff, drawing some Bionicle. I'm going to draw Vizon and Fenrak here. But before I do, I'm going to tease you with a few things. Because you asked how I make them. How I made these. I actually brought a few pieces out of the archives to show you. I think, have I got it here? Issue 7? Can I find issue 7? Yeah, this guy here. This is the first year that I really started drawing the underwater characters, and I have some of the layouts I did for the cover. So this was a layout sketch, and typically if I draw a layout sketch, I want to just sort of get an idea down pretty quickly. These are done in pencil. Now you can see this has some red on it, a heavy red outline. I don't know why in the world I was doing that necessarily, but I will tell you, about the time I was drawing this, I was doing some really interesting things experimenting with making my art, where I would use some color on a black and white piece, and I would scan it as color, and the parts that were in color versus black and white, I could separate out a little bit. It was almost like allowing me to make a selection, Photoshop a little bit more easily. This is the cover concept I had, and announcing these new characters. I know Lego probably saw all these. This is one where I thought about having his sort of tendril make a frame for the whole cover. I didn't go along and continue to do that. How about this? This, I think, is another cover layout that could have been for the same issue. Now, these are pretty fast. You can see I'm kind of hammering these out, but this is how I tended to work. This looks like this was a layout that I did. This was the layout I did for the same issue. This is all art you guys have probably never, ever seen. And it looks like, I wonder if this got used in the book someplace, but this looks like this was a model I drew of the same character, maybe the first one. And then what's fascinating was I found this, and this looks like this was a background for one of these pages. So people ask how this is made. I somehow made these things in pieces. So if I had a background like this, I could move figures around if I had a really complicated scene, almost like a color forms, and assemble it in pieces. This might have been a printed background from somewhere in the book. I'd have to go look. But so the bottom line is, when you make this thing, and DC Comics and Lego was this way, they never really asked me how I made the stuff. They only wanted to know that it would print well, that it would look good. They always received a digital file, and they would approve or say, no, please alter something. But I know a couple times, I even took a Bionicle character, if I needed like a really dramatic silhouette of one of these guys, and I needed it really precise, I would take a photograph of it backlit and then Photoshop that in. I only did that 2 or 3 times. I think there's one where Hakan's eyes are going off. I did that on him. But my thing was, because I knew that I could work digitally or turn in digital files, I could use absolutely anything. I could use ink, gouache, pencil. I could, when I say anything, I mean, I could even change how one panel was drawn to the next if I wanted it to look differently. So a lot of these began lightly penciled, as you saw there. Then I would usually come in with ink and gouache and make them very similar to this, which, as I said, this was one that I made on the live feed 2 years ago. I think there's video that exists where you can see how I made that, and I'm going to make one of those here in just a few minutes, and you can sort of see how I do it. I want to tempt you guys, though, and show you a few other things I've done here recently. So I think 2 years ago I said I was going to draw Axon, and I did. And then I said last year I was going to draw Brutaka, but I never was able to find my Brutaka, so I drew Axon again. Well, I found my Brutaka, and this is a new Brutaka that I drew. It is giant, and this is the size that I tend to work on these days. You can see that it's fully inked and rendered, and a lot of it has sort of a choppy, broken black. I can apply my inks sometimes with my fingers, sometimes with steel wool brush. I can use a makeup sponge. Whatever makes a mark I like, I'll use it. I've used paper towels before. But it's that sort of broken, scumbly application of black ink that'll give me these sort of nice organic grays. Now, if you think this is cool, tune in on Monday and you'll get to see it full colored. And to tease everybody, again, here, you guys will dig on this. I drew the Axon. This is one I drew for you guys last year on the live feed. Well, since then, I got very excited and I decided to color it in Photoshop, which yielded this. How's that? So, as I said, Alex got to be the colorist on Lego Bionicle, and he did a really, really good job. If they had turned me loose, and I don't think they would have given me quite this much freedom because I can go crazy, this is what the whole book would have looked like. It's awfully dark. It's dynamic. It's dramatic, but to some extent, undeniably, it does obscure the characters a little bit. It's my style.
There's lots of freaking out over that. So
I thought it looks good. Like I said, I'm going to show
I just want to remind everybody who's watching now, they should follow you on Facebook. You're Stuart Sayger on Facebook because you share Lego Bionicle stuff as well as lots of other cool pop culture stuff on a regular basis. I do. It's just fun. It'd be fun to have everybody follow.
And I want to show you that, guys, a few things. I'm going to, in just a few minutes, I'm going to set up some paper. And I'm going to draw these on a fen rack. And I've got a little art camera here so we can show the drawing surface as I make it. You can see how I make these. But before that, I'm going to bore you guys happily with a few other projects I've been working on just to show you what's been going on in between Bionicle and honestly how Bionicle has affected other jobs I've gotten. So for example, this isn't exactly Bionicle, but brother, it's pretty close. A wonderful job that I got to do a year or two ago were covers for the Transformers. So this is an Optimus Prime I did, and here it is after I colored it on the comic book. So there's the finished printed version, and here's how I drew the Optimus. And if you saw from the Bionicle pages I showed here earlier, it's made exactly the same way. My approach is the same. The tools and tricks and approaches that I developed as part of Bionicle, I held on to and I saved when I made these Transformers pieces. This is Soundwave here, and he is the cover of issue 2. Both of these pieces, here's a close-up of the back cover of the Transformers comic. This is Optimus Prime, and I actually think that there is a direct link between this and how I drew all those Bionicles. Here he is in full color. I said I'm going to be selling some Bionicle comics on my show on Monday. I'll also be selling copies of the Transformers books and some of the other stuff I've done. If you want to tune in, you can get some of that. And speaking of other toys, here's another project that I got here really recently. This is a cover that I made for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Last Ronin Lost Years. Last Ronin has been the biggest thing in the Turtles world, and there's the printed cover. I tend to like to work big like this, and it's one of the reasons why I want to show you this. Had I had my druthers, I probably would have drawn the Lego Bionicle this big as well. By contract, I was not allowed to. Part of the contract with Lego was that I had to draw it on DC Comics illustration board, which was 11 by 17. But these days when I draw, I like to work larger, and this is about 20 by 24. Why do I like to work that big? I'll tell you. Because I can use my fingers. I'll very often put the ink on my fingers and make different smudges and marks that way, and it creates an organic approach to the art that I just can't get from almost any other tool. But when you draw with your fingers, it means that's the smallest brush I've got, so I can't work really small and detailed. So a way around that is you draw big, you can put in the details with your fingers, photograph it, and shrink it small, and then it tightens up. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Are you guys freaking out over that? I hope you were.
Yes, lots and lots of freaking out.
So, by the way, for those who don't know, I'm actually drawing covers for Alice Cooper, the rock and roll star right now, for his comic book. And in just a couple days, I'm going to start working on covers for Conan. Let's pull a piece of paper out of this pad, and I'll get to work and start making an original for you. I told you I like to draw big, and I'll tell you, these pages are hard to get out of this pad.
Yeah. Let me know if you need an extra hand.
There we go.
That camera's never even going to be able to take all that in.
I know. So I'm going to set up this camera here. We're going to change our view.
When you were working on Bionicle, you weren't drawing that big, were you?
No, I just said I couldn't. I wasn't allowed to. Would you hand me my art caddy back there?
I'm getting that to you.
Thanks.
There's
So
stuff on your art caddy. Hold on. There you go.
Thank you, madam. I didn't really mean to abandon that over.
So the size question was a lead-in to what is your preferred size to work on now? Is it this great
that big size?
Big size here, which is actually 19 by 24, right?
Yeah, I wish I could get them to be 20 by 24, just because of the sheet.
I'm going to change your lighting a little.
Yes.
Your lighting has gotten very Stuart Sayger-y over the course of this.
Let's see. Have I plugged in the camera here? We're going to plug in this camera.
Okay.
I think it's plugged in over here.
Okay, great.
And I can't remember what it's called. A camera phone, art camera. It's probably that. Oh, I go through this all the time. Give me just a second. We're not dark here. I just have to configure this thing. It'll turn on here in just a second.
Yes. We're black right now, but
it does that all the time. There, look at that. Isn't that better? There we go. We're going to look at my drawing surface area. You guys can see everything here. By the way, these are the glasses I was wearing, and they're just magnifiers. But when I draw, I often use this ridiculous pair here. And the reason why I use this pair is because the lenses are so much larger. Now, a lot of times when I'm drawing and I'm drawing detail, I want a little pair of magnifiers so I can get in there and draw a nut and bolt on these things. But a lot of times, if you buy magnifying glasses, they're really small. And that's mainly because magnifying glasses are for people to read lines of type. So a little small area of type. But when you draw, you want to be able to see as much of your board as you can. So I look long and hard to try to find glasses with big lenses. Even if I'm drawing a really small portion of something, you want to be able to see the edges to make sure your proportions are correct. So I'm going to put on these hideous big glasses to draw. I don't wear them to look cool. I wear them to draw things that look cool. So here's how this works. I've got my models for Vizon and Fenrac, right? Here they are in front of me. And for those who don't know, as I said, this is the very, very first Vizon and Fenrac built in the world. I remember they told me that. The contracts I had to sign for this were absurd. Now, I don't really use these too much in the initial stages of my drawing. You know, I might examine the toy and sort of see what it does and try to come up with a cool pose in my head. But I don't really draw from looking at this until it gets down to where I'm having to draw the mechanisms. So I have them on hand, but I usually kind of draw from the hip, shooting from the hip. So let's draw a cool piece here. I'm going to draw a horizontal piece. I'm going to lift my camera up and I hope you can see how big I'm actually working here. There it is. It's the 14, what did I say here? 19 by 20 wide. I can't get the camera quite big enough to see all of it, so I'm going to try to show you as much as I can.
Do you want me to get more to set it on? Do you want me to pull it back farther?
We'll see if we need it. Let's see here. 19 by 20. Can I turn down the volume there? Yeah, we don't need that that feedback. So I'm going to unplug this audio set for a second. So here's what I'll do. I start off with a quick sketch. I actually am not going to use all the paper, so I'm making a guideline here at the top telling me to not draw above that because I really want a nice big panoramic piece. Trying to get a rhythm of what the spider would look like here, and I feel like to really make him look dramatic, I don't want the legs in close, which is how he'd actually walk. I'm going to exaggerate everything and try to really splay his legs out. If you want him to stand tall, you put the legs under him. If you want him to look dramatic, you have them be really extended. And it's kind of hard to see here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put the camera eye height right about here. So to make it dramatic, I'm going to make it so you can see his underbelly. Right? So that might be one of his legs. Another one might be up there. Okay? But I'll tell you why it's not going to be up there. Because if I put it there, then I've covered his face. Because his head has to go here. So I might have his other arm be something like that. I want everybody to be able to see his big gnarly mouth, right? Also, I'm going to cheat and draw him a little bit bigger than he is, than he actually is relative to Vizon. The reason I'm going to do that is because it makes him look more beastly. I like the toy, but I actually felt that when you put Vizon on Fenrac has an awful lot to carry here, right? They're not, Vizon might be 3/4 his size. Well, and I can tell you, a horse has a hard time carrying somebody who's 3/4 his size. So we're gonna cheat and make Vizon a little bit big, or make Fenrac a little bit bigger. The other thing that's really cool is, and this is where I'm going to technically change the model a little bit here. When I got the toy, one of the things that I was able to do from time to time, I'm trying to remember, they were usually very specific about which hand had the Zammerfear shooter or tools like this. In my mind, this is a staff, and this ought to be something that he can change from hand to hand. So I'm going to put his staff in his other hand. Why would I do that? Because I want to be able to show it, and I don't want it going in front of his head. Also, he's got this great dramatic cape, so I'm going to make the cape super long and tail off to the back to make it more dramatic. If you guys have ever seen a Silver Surfer comic book, the Silver Surfer often stands on the surfboard and he stretches his arms out like he's running or something. Well, he's not moving. The surfboard is doing everything, but it's more dramatic that way. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have these on leaning forward to sort of create that dramatic motion as well. Now I need his other arms back here, so I'll have his back arm be in front of his head to give it more energy. This is his back leg that's closest to us. This is his second. This is his back leg, and his other one will be right there. So as you can see, this is pretty fast and rough, and all I'm doing at this point is, sorry for the noise, I'm looking for an eraser. This is just laying out the composition. So I hope you can see it all here. I've got everything I need in place, basically for how he's going to fill the space. The only thing that's interesting is I want the ground to be a little, or different, is I want the ground to be really broken here. You know, Vizon and Fenrak and a lot of the Bionicles lived in this world that had a lot of lava and stone and, you know, not gravel, because gravel is manufactured, but let's put some broken rocks and things, almost like he's in a cave behind him. This will add some depth to it. And then, anytime you want things to really look dramatic, this is a great trick you can do. Have something like a rock or something come up like this. Not there, not where I had it, because I don't want to cover his foot. But I can have one come up like that, and I'm going to make that dark. And having these little bits that are dark in front is going to push the action back away from us. It creates a nice sort of layer of depth. Okay, this is already looking pretty good. Can you see it sort of starting to take shape, how it's going to fit together? Now here's the problem, you guys are going to be frustrated by this. I am not going to be able to finish this tonight. This is a grand piece. I'm going to do the pencil work, I'm going to get it laid out, and then I'm probably going to get it looking really good, but then I'm going to ink it probably Sunday night. And then if you tune in Monday on my Facebook, I'll have it finished and you can see it there. How's that? That'll be good. So let's start working in some of the pieces here. He basically has an arm that has 1, 2, and 3 pieces. This piece here is the key piece to me. It's what really has that sort of curved and thrust and hits the ground. It's the part that I really have to get right, because I feel like it just has so much of the energy. So I see they extend up higher, so I'm blocking that in. And sort of figuring out now exactly how it connects.
Jonathan Crissetti's already vying for a print of this piece, just so you know.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I love the support. Here's what's interesting about this. The back legs of this work very differently. See how they can twist? You guys have probably handled this. They've got these 2 ball and socket joints, and it's very different than the front leg. This sounds kind of dumb, but this would be one of the things that I had to be very careful of when I draw the Lego Bionicles, because I would lay things out like this, and then very quickly I would say, oh, well, the front legs and the back legs must probably match. And they're very similar, but they don't at all. So the trick is to make sure that I draw this leg here, and this one back there, and I just realized just now in handling it how differently they go together. So, no lie, this is how I sort of lock this out, just as I'm doing here. I'm just getting the basic shapes in. You guys are probably rolling your eyes at me right now and say, I think we figured out how Stuart's pieces seems to be so free from the conventional design of these characters. But I will tell you, when you draw this way, your pieces have a lot of life. It keeps you from getting too tight. It keeps the composition from being really stiff. I mean, here's the thing. These characters, they don't bend like humans do. You know, we think of a finger as bending like this. We forget it'll twist. if you're really doing something with your hands and you mash them on something, you can put your hand on something like that, or you can really dig and pull. See how my tendons jump out here? You want to figure out a way to include some of that in on these Bionicles to bring them to life. They don't actually have tendons, but they've got pistons and things like this that you can have twist and torque just enough. If they look like they have strain on them, then it looks like that the character is moving. See, you guys are getting a big art education here. I should be paid for this. Now, because this arm is coming out almost directly at us, I got to be really kind of careful in how I block everything out, because I really need this to come forward and not have a whole bunch of lines and connecting pieces behind it, because this is so close to the eye would focus on this more than that. I'll block it out, but some of that may end up being silhouetted. Now, here's the other thing I used to do on this. So like in this case right here, his head is really important. I would probably work harder to get the head right than I would some of the other parts. I really tried to get the number of holes and gaskets and things right on the Lego Bionicle, but sometimes, maybe the proportions I'd have on these triangles here would be a little bit off. But maybe that would be more forgivable on the leg, but not on the face, because people look at faces. So what I would do regularly now, if I were going to really work on Fenric's face and head here, I would just pop this off, and then I would hold it by itself, and I wouldn't have to deal with the rest of the body. I've since found out from people that as these things get older, sometimes they crack.
Yeah.
I'm really not interested in cracking the Fenric head. I'll bet you guys aren't either. So why don't I just continue to draw it attached and not disassemble it? What do you guys think? Good idea? I think so.
Adventure Blur on the YouTube feed has said, as someone who was raised on these comics, this is incredible to watch, especially this set. Got it for my 8th birthday, and it was always one of my favorites.
I think this is one of the very best. I'm sure that Steve has heard this story before, because I've got some regular people who've tuned in multiple times, but I have to tell the story. This was the set that held up the production of the comic book more than any other. This was the one we waited on, and I was just like, when is the thing going to arrive? And as I said, I had to go to the airport. They had to fly out the very first model of this to me. I had to sign all his papers, and so I'd been up all night working on the book. You guys have heard this story before, but it's so good. I tell it every year. This is when I violated my contract too. I go to the airport and I pick the thing up, and I've got to finish the artwork, and I've been up all night and I'm exhausted and hungry and tired. And I said, you know what? You worked awfully hard. You raced out to the airport, did everything they want. You're going to break your neck. I said, why don't you treat yourself and have something to eat? So I went to this little restaurant it's a little cafe that's not far from my house, and decided to treat myself to a nice omelet and French toast and whatever else I wanted. And so I placed the order for my food. And while I was waiting, there was this couple that was there, two women who looked like they were having sort of a housewife's date with their children, and they were eating, and the kids were bored out of their mind. They looked like they'd been sitting there with their meals done for, a half hour, just waiting for anything interesting to happen. And I decided that I was going to, I had this box with me that had the Vizon and Fenric in them, though I didn't know what they looked like. Nobody knew. As I said, they were the only ones that existed. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to open these things up. And I literally just signed a contract, 20 hours earlier, saying that I wasn't going to let anybody see them. And here I am about to open them up and let these kids look at them, because I just felt sorry for them. They were just so bored. So I opened the box up, and I realized that it's this giant, probably the evilest looking of all the Piraka, with this torn, tattered cape and this head that looks kind of like this Geiger thing. H.R. Geiger, the creator of the Alien, and he's standing on this giant spider. And I just thought, this is the coolest toy they've ever made. This is awesome. So I picked him out and I put him on the table, and I watched these kids practically wake up. They just couldn't believe it. They were poking each other. Look at that over there. And I pretended that I was just looking at the the toy and not looking at them and just playing it cool because I'm not supposed to let anybody see it. And then after it's been out for, I don't know, 30 seconds or whatever, my food comes, and I grab the thing and I put it away very quickly, and I look at the children and I just said, it's not even in the stores yet. You know, and then I know that they went home and told their friends, they're like, I just saw this Bionicle, and they said, no, you didn't. And they said, yes, I did. Let's go buy it. And then they didn't find it because, like I said, it wasn't there yet. So I hope that I made liars out of them long enough for them to then be righted later on when they go to the store and say, I told you, there it is. And I remember what it was like to be 9 years old. By the way, so you see what I've done here? If you look carefully, I've actually drawn these on holding two of these staffs. And I'm not sure which one I'm going to use yet. I actually think I'm going to use the back one now because I like the energy going back with his cape, but it also allows him to lead with his chin. I might pull his arm back like that so that his face is actually the lead part of his body. But I think that that would be a nice dramatic pose. What do you guys think? Is it? Can you see it coming to life? Like, these are pretty quick sketches, and I've been talking throughout it, but this is honestly how I made the Bionicle book. I get to about this point, and I kind of had a sense of how the lighting on this was going to work out. So I would probably start at this point thinking about what I would do that would give me some nice lights and darks, shadows and highlights. And the coolest thing I have to work with here is I can show the underside of his body. So these parts are going to have a lot of black. And so will these here because we're seeing under them. It's going to work great with these silhouettes here, with these other rocks that I'm going to put in. It's going to create a lot of depth. This part that's facing us is going to be black, and the reason that is I want the light source to be coming from the very front of the drawing. Getting a bad shadow, you guys, you can't see it. Uh-oh, this is getting too heavy. Gotta move my camera. That's not bad. I'm going to have light come directly at them like this. So anything that is on the back side is going to be in shadow, or anything facing us is going to be in shadow. So probably the end of his pincer there will be in shadow. I'll bet there are going to be shadows coming off of all these teeth. His recessed eye is going to be there. That'll be in shadow. The mechanism that holds all of his head attached is set further back, so his face will block the light. It's going to be in shadow. And then the best thing of all is this big black cape that he's wearing. It's going to be so tattered, and it's going to be this big, long, like Batman cape that goes back here. And I put in X's there because that's a shorthand of me as an inker, to where I know that anything in that area from line to line is going to be solid black. That alone is going to create this solid dynamic shape, and it's going to play with these other shapes. It's what's going to hold this whole thing together. Probably the light is going to catch top of his head. A lot of his back is going to end up being a silhouette. I know this sounds odd, but you'd think you'd want to see all those pieces, but you probably won't. He's going to be walking through, kind of scurrying forward. I'm going to have the smoke and dust come up. And so the bottom portion of him is going to be a little bit obscured by that when I get into the coloring. So this is what's interesting. At this point, you're looking at it and you're like, yeah, okay, but you've got the layout here and you keep telling me you're going to cover this up and this is not going to be seen. How is this going to work? Well, I'm going to rely on silhouettes for a lot of it. This shape of his head is very specific. You know, if you had a photo of just the profile of that head, you could probably tell who that is. All these tools, these make wonderful, really strong silhouettes. So a lot of this will probably end up being in black. There will be some highlights on little bits of it, and then a lot of atmospheric smoke that goes over it. So it'll be this really deep, dramatic piece. I mean, it's one of the great things about drawing the Bionicles. You know, I think on issue 3, I drew the Matoran coming through a hole in the wall, and they were backlit. So all these holes they have in them, there's light penetrating through them. When I was developing my style, I kept thinking that there were so many, you know, you can see all the light that shines through him. It's very rare that you get to work with a character that has holes through them where the negative space can define the shape. I mean, my wife draws an awful lot of animals and a lot of nature pieces. And animals do not have holes in them ever.
Not generally, not unless something bad has happened.
If you're looking at the natural world and you're looking for an opportunity to really draw something with elaborate, complex silhouettes like this, you tend to think of something like deer antlers or something like an octopus that can have a really long tendrils that can maybe overlap and create negative spaces like this. But I mean, those are the only two that come to mind really quickly, where you'd have this sort of strong silhouette of pieces that can overlap.
Yeah.
Am I missing something in nature? Trees have this.
Yeah.
We draw trees like that. Leaves, right.
Yeah.
But animals, not so much.
Skeletons do, and that's another thing that's kind of a parallel between Bionicle and other things in nature, that they have a skeletal structure at least. But
so here's the thing. I don't know if you guys knew this. My wife runs an art center in Hamilton County in Noblesville, Indiana, and it's comments like that are so smart that tell you that she knows a lot about art, because that is exactly right. And these things look very skeletal.
Yeah.
I'm talking about this, and you came up with a better comment than anything I had to say.
Oh.
That was brilliant.
I know you're going to finish this between now and Monday, but a couple of people have asked what other tools you use. Can you show some of the pens and things that you use?
Yeah, so I'm at the point where I would tighten this up. Let's go to something that's a bit more fun. So I'm going to save this. Come back and see me when I have it done. Let's give some faster drawing demos, right? So.
And by the way, you've got an empty bar on the side of your screen right now. It may just be a selection. I think you have a space for your logo currently reserved.
Let's see. Let's see if we can make this work. We've got the art camera on. What's this, you guys?
It may not be as important as continuing to draw. But.
Yeah, except it is. Let's see if we can fix this. This won't be hard. Give me just a second. I'll have to lock preview. Let's see what this does. Doggone it. I'm not sure what the issue is here, after all. I can do that, but I don't think I can change it more. I'm so sorry, you guys. We're going to stick with that for the meantime. I'm glad you caught that.
It was actually Liam who noticed and said something. So
yeah, there should be a logo up here for my website, so you guys are missing the big advertisement. Let's draw here. I'll draw a really quick shot of Vizon's head here. Here's Vizon. So here's how I would tend to draw this sort of thing, and this is how I would do the whole book. What I mean by that is these are the inking techniques I would use to draw the whole book. I'm going to draw this a little bit faster than I normally would. You guys will have to bear with me on that, okay? So I'm going to cut some corners. The proportions on this may not be perfect, but as you guys know, were they ever? This is interesting too, because his face is a little bit similar to Hakan's, except Hakan's has a little piece that jumps out here, whereas his is this continuous shape. That eye's a little high. Always got to remember to draw these cross bolts. My dog is very concerned that I am doing this, so she had to check on me just a moment ago. Okay, that's basically my layout. He's got these Piraka teeth that always look like this. And then, and this is part of the key, see he's got this back component. I'll have mine stick out a little bit further just because I think it's a little bit more dynamic. The standard head connection, he's got the post, and then he's got a cape. Okay. So, oh, we can have a better camera angle than that. That's not any good. You guys can't see anything. Let's try that.
I'm reading comments
That's
instead
better.
of watching cameras.
So here's some of the pieces I'll use regularly. This is a Faber-Castell, couple brush pens. It looks like I didn't bring my big black Oh, I did. Here it is. This is a piece. This is a pen I use a lot. I don't recommend you guys use one of these because everybody hates it but me. It's a Sharpie black paint marker. It is water-based, not oil. These are Faber-Castell brush tip pens. I hope you can see. Got a brush tip. This is a pen that I didn't have when I drew Bionicle. It's called a Fude pen. It's great for making black lines that are really organic. These days, this is probably the pen I would use. I would go to, and I would draw a lot of this. This is probably going to be a little bit looser and faster than even you guys would prefer it to be, but it makes for a very nice organic line because the tip of it is bent. If you can see this, when you lay it down, it makes a wider line. When you prop it upright, it makes a thinner line. It's a little bit tricky to get used to, but I love it. But I use that, and then this is a brush tip pen that was made by, let's pronounce it with me, Ailey. Fudenosuke.
Fudenosuke.
Fudenosuke. It's really flexible, and it gives you a lot of variation in the line, which is, again, what I really like about it. Now, typically, pieces like this that are a circle, when I would have drawn it for the comic book, I probably would have gotten a circle template to make sure that it was right, but I'm trying to get him done here pretty quickly, so a lot of some freehanding, and it'll still look pretty good. Let's see, this is not positioned quite right, so I got to move where it goes. But as you can see, I'm already even ignoring some of the guidelines I've made, and I kind of feel like that's my prerogative as the piece comes around, comes around till it comes to life. If I feel like I've not got something quite where I want it to be, or the line is a little dead, and I want it to have more life, go ahead and change it.
Now, for the most part, when you were drawing the comic book, you really were working manually. You didn't do much digital work, right?
Very little.
But nowadays, you do a lot of digital work for pieces that you make. Most of them still include some manual drawing, but...
Most everything begins life on paper just like this. But I will incorporate more things, particularly if I know I'm doing the coloring. I will incorporate some more digital effects. You know, every once in a while, I'll take a photograph of something for texture. You know, I can put that in digitally. It works fast. You know, some of the things we're trying to do is come up with things that work well and work quickly, right? So this is that big brush that I was, that big marker I was saying that I use, and I don't recommend you use. I like it because it's really wet. It'll give me some really great organic lines. And very often, if I have them here, this is a makeup sponge. I'll actually mix it, put the ink on here, a little bit of saliva to thin out the ink, and I can use it to sort of smear and make some nice smoky effects. It's also great to use if I want to do some lighting on the head here. I can smear it, I can drag it. It gets me some nice grays very, very quickly. Oh, my dog is mad at somebody.
Hey.
Did you guys hear that? Do not mess with my dog, you guys. Let's see. Now, what I can do with this as well, I can pounce with it, which is like tapping. It used to be in the Renaissance days when guys were going to make a painting, a big one, great big painting. What they would do is they would make a little sketch of the painting they were going to make, and then they would draw a grid over it, and then on a big piece of paper they would draw another grid that was proportionally matched the small drawing. So let's say a 1-inch square on the small drawing might equal a 1 foot square on the big drawing. And then they would transfer the drawing off. And then what they did is they took a a needle and they punched a bunch of little holes in the big drawing all over it, right? They outlined everything, and they would hold that drawing up to a bit of canvas or wood that they were going to make the final painting on, and they would take chalk in a bag, much like I was dabbing this, and they would stamp the drawing, and through those little holes, the chalk would transfer onto the big piece of canvas or the piece of wood, and that would serve as the guideline for them to make their painting. So when I tap my ink on like this, like you see me here, I always call it pouncing, because that's what they called tapping on ink or chalk way back in the Renaissance age. I want to sound smart, you know.
That's not the only Renaissance reference you've ever put in a Bionicle content, right?
No, Ailey's trying to give me a chance to bail myself out here. So, as you guys know, maybe you don't, I think it was Bionicle number 11. There's a panel in there that the internet hated me for, and it's called the stick figure panel. If you guys know this one, let's see if I can show it to you here. I think it's in issue 11. This is Matoro after he's put on the Mask of Life. It's this one right here. I got so much hate mail for this panel. This is called, somebody dubbed this the stick figure panel. And it's what it's supposed to be is, if you read the story, Matoro puts on the Mask of Life, and he has this sort of expansion of the mind where he becomes more living than ever, more in touch with life. He can sort of stretch out and touch the universe. And so I tried to draw him in the pose of the Vitruvian Man, which is a drawing that Leonardo da Vinci did of the human being, showing how the human being can sort of move and bend in sort of a mechanical manner. If I just said his name. If Da Vinci was trying to show man more as a machine, I was trying to show a machine more as a man. And I'm not sure that the young readers of Bionicle got it, but I'm telling you, that's what's happening in this panel. So, my art history, anybody who said they studied art history in college never used it, let me tell you, I used it. And if I'm really going to be on my soapbox, the funny thing is, if you study art history in college, I don't know what jobs you use it for explicitly, but I found it very helpful in drawing comic books all the time. I learned a lot of vocabulary, which was very helpful. I can think of times when I was talking to an art director or an art collector, and somebody was trying to describe what they wanted. I can say, you know, is it this? Do you want something that you think is maybe darker? Do you want more chiaroscuro? Do you want it to have more tenebrism? This vocabulary was very, very helpful for talking to people to figure out what it is they want out of their work. One of the notes that I used to get from Lego on the coloring, while I was still the colorist of the Lego, which wasn't for very long, they would ask for colors that popped more. And I would say, I have no idea what that means. And they just said, you know, we want it to be, and then they would kind of be at a loss for words. We want it to pop more. And I thought, well, I'll give you what you want. You know, do you want a different hue? Do you want a different value? Do you want a different saturation? And it took a while to sort of make sure that we communicated on the terms. But once we got that down, it was really easy for me to make art they liked better, give them what they wanted, and they could express themselves better. And the better I knew what they wanted, the better I could give it to them. It just sort of helped all around. If you're ever someplace and somebody's trying to sell you carpet, and they say, we have many other shades of carpet, you can sound like a smart aleck and tell them this is true. A tint is a color plus white. A shade is a color plus black. So sometimes people will show you something that's pink, and they say, how do you like this shade? You can be a smart aleck and say, that's not a shade, that's a tint.
That would be very smart alecky.
I would be very smart
ago, when you were talking, you did something very cool, which is that you used a Post-it note as a frisket to
Yes.
To save your piece. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So very often this is a technique that's used a lot more when people use like an airbrush or something like that. You can use a piece of paper or something to sort of block out the area you don't want the ink to get to. And it allows you to, rather than having to fill in line very quickly, you can mask it off, know you got it masked off, and then paint over everything and peel the area off. A lot of times when people use a frisket, they'll get a piece of a big sheet of paper that's just slightly sticky. They'll paste it over the entire thing, and let's say they wanted to paint all of Vizon's head here, but not his eye. They'll put a piece of sticky paper, like a Post-it note, over this, and they'll cut out just where the eye is, peel the rest of the paper up, and leave the eye in there. Now, I didn't do it because my style is a little bit more forgiving. I could just hold mine in place. But I've used all kinds of different things to give myself. It's called a frisket when you do that, when you shield an area off. I've done all kinds of things to create my own friskets. Very often I'll use like my thumb, particularly if I'm using an airbrush or something like that. I'll just, cover up the piece I want as best I can, or I'll take it, if I want something like a broken rock, I'll take, here's what I'll do. I'll show you, you'll like this. I'll take a piece of paper and I'll just tear it in the shape I want. If I want like I've got a stalactite that can stick up. And what I can do is, I can't make this part dark, but I can make everything around it dark. So if I wanted to, I could have a stalactite stick up surrounded by like a dark background. And this is just how I'd make it. I did this a lot on the BIONICLE book. So I've got that nice smoky broken background, and there's my highlight. And if I really want to add some depth to it, I can just have a couple little lines come up through it. There, that's how you make like a nice pointed cliff or something that sticks up out of the back. And then you can really get crazy with it, because like, look at this. If I wanted to, I can cut the inside of this out. See, again, this is an art lesson. I can put that in. I can move it over just a little from where it's supposed to be, right? And then I can pounce in lightly a little bit of shadow on the backside. See if this works. And then it has a little bit of rim light around it. It works just fine. And then it allows me to have that white channel. And very often I'll come in, use a white pen like this. This is a Presso correction pen. It has white paint on it. But I can have, sticks or something come out of here like a silhouette. And it'll give me a really nice effect. And it's how I'm going to draw a lot of his detail on here. So I've gotten to the point close to where it's time to bring this big white marker out, put some highlights back in. Let's see, this is the big broad tip. I'm using this to make some deep shadows in some areas. But honestly, this piece here, we're getting pretty far along. If this were for the comic book, I would consider this about 3/4 done. I'm going to add in some white highlights, and you're going to see it's going to really come alive.
Since not all of the Lego BIONICLE characters had mouths.
Yeah.
Do you have any restrictions in terms of what kind of expressions you could put on characters?
You really couldn't play with that too much. So, their heads are something that I really can't bend or change too much. I mean, really were, there were things I could play with and change the model on and things I couldn't. So we wanted expressions. And so I really relied a lot more on lighting. If people were scary, I had the light shine up on them, kind of like when you're in it's Halloween, you put the flashlight under your chin, right? That worked really well. Or if people were solemn, I'd have a direct light coming straight down on them, and the body language would be really kind of arms down to their side, like that. And then have their eyes be in shadow, things like that. But we really didn't get as much freedom to have them have emotions as you'd think. I could always push them just a little bit. A character that was angry, I could have the eyes squint a little bit more. Or surprised, I could open them a little bit more than normal. But you didn't want to get too far off model. Now here's where the white paint's going to come in. You guys are going to like this. Because this is going to create so much of my lighting. a little bump there. He doesn't really have one, but it makes for a nice sort of sense of depth there. The other thing is, this thing I'll do, I'm going to get the ink really thin on my fingers. Put a little bit down on his teeth right there, and it'll make them look a little bowed, which is kind of what I want. See this part that comes forward, and that does too? How about a little shadow on his teeth right there? There. Looking better. I'll cut these back in with some, I always call it cutting the light back in. I don't know where that comes from, but it cuts through the black, sort of breaks it.
Since you finished your runs on Bionicle, do you ever have opportunities to talk to other artists or any of the writers or anything about Bionicle?
I talked to Greg Farshey a little bit, and Greg Farshey's not with Lego anymore, and it's kind of a drag because for me, it kind of ended it spoke to the end of an era. I mean, he was the Bionicle guy. I had an email exchange with Tom Grinberg one time. Tom Grinberg is a wildly skilled artist who's been drawing, I think, Tarzan for the Sunday newspaper. But he tried out for the job. I know that I beat him for the job. Just tell like it is. I was very fortunate. I don't know how many times I can beat that guy at anything. He's really good. But I remember writing him because I had seen his tryout piece. And I remember he kind of laughed. He said, I really wanted that job, and I was also relieved when I didn't get it. I said, tell me why. And he said, it sounded really exciting. It sounded good. He said, all the reasons why he would have enjoyed it. But he admitted they are demanding to draw. It was funny because I got the job, and he said, drawing that every day would be kind of like drawing a car engine every day. It's like it's so mechanical. And of course it's mechanical. We know that. But think about this. I just said this is a guy who's been drawing Tarzan. Mm-hmm. He's drawing leaves and trees and monkeys and rivers, and I'm all constantly drawing something that's mechanical. I'll tell you what, if he was able to draw these machines half as well as he draws Tarzan, it would have been awesome. I'm sure he's up to the task. He's just so skilled. For whatever reason, they were looking for a particular style, though, and I gave it to them. Let's see. Does Vizon, can he shoot eye blast? Does anybody know? I'm going to have this glow come from the other side. Now, what this is, I'm hoping that his other eye is glowing as well. So it looks like I'm just sort of smearing this with my hand, and I am, but it's giving me a nice kind of atmospheric glow around those eyes. A great way to really make anything look bright, this is my best secret, is make this other stuff around it dark. If I really want that eye to glow, let's blacken in a lot more of this. What is the light source? If it's that eye, then everything else has to be dark around it. You can see it's kind of coming together.
So there's debate on Vizon here. Somebody said no. Somebody said, I think he can. He had future vision.
Whoa!
No, he doesn't have eye beams, but his eyes definitely glow.
Well, the toy does light up, and I was proud to show, if you can see it, I think mine still works. Let's see. Look at that. Mine still lights up.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Apparently he traded the laser eyes for a cool cape.
I like that. Hey, man, cape is pretty cool.
Especially if you're an artist. You can do a lot. You can do a lot with laser eyes, but you can definitely do a lot with a cape.
What do you guys think? Does this look like Vizon to you guys?
Folks are asking if you're going to scan this or do anything with it after the feed.
Seems like I should post it, doesn't it? You guys kind of want to see it. I'm putting a little bit of star glints on him here.
Liam is going to take care of reposting this whole feed, and then we'll also help people find examples of the layout you just did when it's finished on Monday. So
yeah, please do.
The organizers of World Bionic Day are so good and take care of everybody so well.
Yeah, they have. I've been delighted. This is, I think, Liam, is this the third year or the fourth year I've done this? I think I've been involved with it before, but I don't remember how many times. Also, when is there going to be a physical, in-person Bionicle convention? I want to come. You guys want me to come, don't you? I hope.
Takes a little bit for the feed to catch up, so I will keep you in the loop as folks respond. Third year now, says Liam.
Liam would know. Now, this looks fine. Watch this black line I'm going to put in here. It's going to add a lot of weight to the bottom of this.
Someone just said, I need a 10th glint. So.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Somebody's calling.
Somebody's.
I think this is just about done as it should be. That is what Benrak looks like. I might, just because I want it to be a little bit more solid, I think I'm going to put in a little bit more gray background around him just so he can sort of play against it. But let's take a look at him. There he is. It's the most Geiger-looking robot I've ever seen. He looks pretty good.
Take on an alien just fine.
Yeah, and now this is where I'd usually get to this, and I would come back and I'd say, were there any details I really wanted that I should have shown that didn't get included? I think I want that hole in his head to be cut out a little bit better. I might like that line to jump out a little bit better. So you can kind of tighten it up a little bit, just this last second. But this is looking pretty good. Do I have any questions or comments on this?
Lots of people are saying they'd buy prints of this, so that's exciting.
You're very kind.
And let's see, I'm trying to catch up with everybody.
By the way, everybody give Ailey a big thanks because she has her full job to do, not just take care of me.
Steven's been very helpful translating the feed back and forth too. So
I believe that. Well, there it is. Now you know what it's missing, don't you? Gotta sign it.
I was really hoping you were just going to sign it with the makeup sponge.
Oh, yes, you were. Let's see. And then what I did was I darkened in a big spot there white. Whoops, because I want to sign it white.
Let's do this. You use your hand. You're fine.
There we go, you guys. And, as I always do, August 8th, 2023. World.
Actually, the 10th.
Oh, it is. What's wrong with me? It is the 10th.
This is the 8th month. That's what you were thinking.
Now we'll let that dry for a second. I will fix that. You know what? You guys got to see something that's probably much more endemic of what I do, and that is put something down that I'm very confident about in white paint only to, or put something confident down in black only to cover it in white paint. And I have to correct it, so that's what I'm going to do here. It's almost dry. Anyway, I really want to thank everybody for bringing me on. As a reminder, come see me Monday at 7:30. I'm going to have a lot of other Bionicle stuff you guys haven't seen. I got to show many things, but I had other art here that I wanted to show that I didn't even pull out. So we're going to show that. I'll get a good scan of this. I might even have this colored by then, which would be really cool, so you guys can see that.
And that'll be on your Facebook page, right?
On my Facebook page. I'm going to show it simultaneously on Instagram. So find me. It's Stuart Sayger, just like my name says behind me. But let's take a look. And I'm going to switch my camera view. Hold this up. So how's that?
That would be smart.
So here's that. You don't need this big bright light. Am I feeding still, or did it freeze you guys? This looks frozen.
Yes, it is frozen at the moment. I am not sure why. You look very concerned.
Yeah, I do. Wonder why it's doing that. Let's try this. Yeah, it's just frozen. What's going on
So
here?
weird. I don't know. Well, I could grab my phone. We could use it real quick. Give me a second.
Incredible.
Yeah.
What if I hit refresh? Is there a refresh?
There is a refresh.
Huh. Okay, well, I'm going back to the art camera. Is it still live? It is. Let's see.
Give me a second.
Oh, this is what I should have been doing all along. Look at this. I could have had my face up in the corner.
Oh.
But it's frozen. PC camera. What? How annoying. I was going to sign off and say goodbye to everybody. I don't know
Just
that I
give me
can.
just a second. I'll get there for you.
It's okay. I got an idea. Watch this. I'll let this fix. Is it? See if I'm right. Look at that. It did.
Oh, great.
So, I want to be able to hold this up for everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Please come see me next or on Monday. There it is. I told you I like to work big. Let's get some light on it here. How's that? A lot of light. But there it is, big. That's how I tend to make these things. If you give me the opportunity to scan it, you'll get a much better picture of it for Monday. And as I said, I'm going to have other people to show, other pieces to show. I know that I'm going to be doing some comic book conventions. Please come see me at these things. Bring your Bionicle comic books. I'm happy to talk about them. I know there are a bunch of stories I didn't tell this time. I told some ones you guys had heard before, but I really want to be able to get to the drawing. Tell me what I left off, Haley.
I think that's pretty good. So, I think we've all had a great time, and we're so glad we get to be a part of this, right?
I got to tell you, I'm incredibly flattered. Since I got to work on Bionicle, I have drawn comics of the Transformers, The Walking Dead, Joker. I worked on the Man of Steel movie, the rock band Kiss, Alice Cooper, G.I. Joe. What did I leave off? Xena, Warrior Princess, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But I will tell you, and it's not a joke, it's no hyperbole, this job means so much to me that I got to work on Bionicle. It was the job that really sort of made my career, broke me out. Prior to this, I'd done a self-published comic book and had done a couple trading cards for DC Comics, but this was my regular gig. I remember having dinner with my parents and my sister, telling them that I got the job and that it was not a little thing. It was going to be what I do for this year and the next year. And to this day, I have fans who come up who tell me things like, I learned to read from your comic books, or I was excited to draw because of these. I know that this, probably more than any other project I worked on, was an introduction of comic books to really young fans. And so I'm really flattered if I was able to inspire you to collect comic books or build some sets that maybe I made up because I was not given any guidance on it. The number of people who've come and seen me at shows who've told me stories about reading Bionicle or collecting it when they were little has always meant a lot to me. I know that everybody who's ever given me a Bionicle drawing that they did when we were young, I've kept them. I still have them all. I know somebody made a Bionicle necklace for me. I still have that. The fact that I can be a part of something that is so loved means an awful lot to me. And I really want to thank you guys, Liam, especially for bringing me back and having me be a part of this. I will absolutely be back for 2024.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And wait, I heard there were some trading cards available for this. I got to get some of these trading cards. I need more than one. I need some. We may have to turn something like this into next year's card. What do you think? Is that a good idea, Liam? I think so. Let's do it. So thank you so much, you guys. Unless there are any last minute questions, I'm going to say goodbye and come see me. Go to stuartsayger.com. It's right behind me. It'll tell you all the shows I'm attending. And really, definitely going to want to be back Monday at 7:30 for my live feed there. Because as I said, I'm going to show a lot that I didn't show here. And we're going to be selling some Bionicle comics and giving away a Bionicle drawing.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Good night.